Hello, everybody, and you are very, very welcome to Writer's Block today. My guest, all the way from the United States, is Rabbi Michael Shevack. Now, he's published many books, but the last two books that he has published are really very appropriate for the current times that we are in. Soul Searching, Soul Lessons, Finding Yourself, and a whole country possibly finding themselves too. So will you please welcome to the show, Michael Shevack. You're very welcome.
How are you, Miriam?
Very, very well indeed. Tell me where you are.
I am in Pennsylvania. I am in a beautiful town in Pennsylvania, right along the Delaware River.
Oh, beautiful.
Which George Washington crossed during the Revolution. It's very famous.
Yes.
And it's very, very pretty. And I am blessed. It's in between Philadelphia and New York.
Oh, wow. That is wonderful. And what's your weather like at the moment?
Perfect fall weather. The trees are yellow and red and all sorts of beautiful colors. And when the sun is shining, it's actually about 66 degrees right now.
Oh,
couldn't be a more perfect fall day.
We envy you. The frost has started over here in Ireland.
Yeah, we had it a couple of days ago. And it
goodness.
already dropped down to 29 degrees. Our Fahrenheit. You use Fahrenheit there because of England?
Yes, Celsius here.
Yeah, so, we'll have to do the math, but I don't remember it, so I know.
Absolutely. Well, look, it's again a little reminder, really, in that into how important it is to see mirrored back to you the face of God and all these important things that we sometimes lose sight of. You have written the most wonderful book, two books that we're going to discuss, but the first one in main detail today, Soul Lessons from the Wizard of Oz. I absolutely loved reading this, Michael. It was a wonderful book.
And you read them.
Oh, I make a point of reading all the books of all the guests.
So many people who interviewed actually don't read the book. So I am really delighted.
Well, listen, I loved it because I'm a performer, but I also have 2 degrees in literature, and I've always had a deep connection, spiritual connection too. So for me, it was a really, really interesting piece of work because for our viewers watching, you will know the story of the Wizard of Oz, and the piece of literature itself, the book form, has some minute differences to the film that you may have watched. But it is still a remarkable film, and we'll all have been touched by it. And as a singer, I can't tell you how many times I've sung Somewhere Over the Rainbow and tried to find a new angle on it every time. But this book is very, very special because what Michael has done is he's broken it down into soul lessons. So looking at the story of the Wizard of Oz from a spiritual perspective. Now, of course, you can study this under identities in literature and look at the metaphorical meanings, but not too many. And this is something very important that he says in the foreword. You won't find too many studies of the spiritual aspect and how it applies to you as an individual. So, Michael, can you take us there for a moment? What was the inspiration for going down that road? Did you have an epiphany moment with regard to that story?
I have been so entranced by the story of the Wizard of Oz since I was young. And I just watched it, and besides it just being wonderful and entertaining, and I saw the movie, I ran to the bookstore, to the library. It was the library. And I got a copy of it, and I read through the series. I couldn't stop. It was a hunger. And the reason it was a hunger, I only learned years, decades later, was that it was speaking to me quietly. There was a meaning that was under the veil of the page that was talking to me. And I wasn't fully aware at all what it was saying, but I just had this hunger, and I was always thinking about it. Somehow it was, it took on the quality of scripture to me.
Yes.
It had a holiness, and it taught. There was something in it that I needed. I needed that piece of information.
Yes.
And I became entranced. And one day, as I say in the introduction, I just kind of was in Manhattan, and it just hit me. And the book was hatched whole. It just like popped out of the egg. I just had to move my fingers on the keys and make it happen. It
Yes.
was born. It had been gestating in me for decades. And that was it.
Yes, yes, it was. And I think all of us can share that experience. As you start to read through the book, you start to say, you know, those witches, I've got them both in me.
We,
The wicked witch of the West, and also Glenda, you
yes,
know?
we all do. And that's the beauty of the story. The story speaks to women and men and all people who have souls. And by the way,
Yes.
the word Dorothy, let's not forget the word Dorothy comes from the Greek, which means a gift from God.
A gift from God, yes. And I loved the way in the book you would drop that in,
Yeah,
the aunt's names, what that actually means, all these different little things, which it's like a million threads coming together. And
it's a
it does remind us that, of course, when it comes to stories for children and nursery rhymes, they are usually layered life lessons.
astonishing. And many times we're layering this all the time and we're not even aware what we're doing.
Absolutely, absolutely.
You
But
know,
this particular story is unique.
it is.
Isn't it just, getting to know, your Tin Man, your heart? You take people through all of the different stages and you focus on the characters. So when it came to actually writing the book, you say it flowed very easily. Um, did you have a particular structure?
Oh, the structure was the structure of my life. I was Dorothy. Okay. Right. And really, I was Dorothy. Male, female, Dorothy is bigger than Dorothy. That's why we don't have ruby slippers on the cover, by the way. We have gender neutral red Converse.
Yes.
So we can have both men and women. But I was the kind of very sensitive, connected child. I was very connected to family. I was very connected to the folks around me, but I was so deeply connected that I could not surface as a soul.
Yes.
And I was like Dorothy. As painful as it was, I had to tear her away. I had to sever and tear and tear and tear away from all of the love so I could breathe and find my own identity only later on, like Dorothy, to descend back into Kansas in a balloon and realize everything I ever needed was right there. And the rebellion was part of it too.
The
So
rebellion was part of it. You make that point in the book, really, not to be afraid of that. It has its place.
because your identity is sacred,
Yes.
your identity is sacred. And from a spiritual point of view, it belongs to God. Your identity, meaning your soul, comes from God. So it gets a higher priority than your parents or your mates or your children or anything. You have to have an identity that is a pure spiritual light. And sometimes in that process, you have to tear away from the people that you're with and the older people that you're worshiping, the people who are adults, in order to find yourself. And I was like Dorothy. And I left my version of Kansas, and had to get onto that road to open up my mind, my scarecrow, open up my heart to find my missing Tin Man heart, and find my courage, because I didn't realize how much fear I had in me, and all that connection to my family was in part love, but it was also fear contaminated. And that's what was stopping me from shining my light and knowing my soul.
Yes, and you talk about failing to believe in ourselves, needing to forgive ourselves.
Yes, because the issue is that we have, I would say, false authorities. Kind
Yes,
of like Professor Marvel, who sits down by
yes, yes,
by the crystal ball and fakes he's a fake professor.
yes,
Okay? And we all have false authorities that we worship. And we give ourselves over to them, and because we give ourselves over to them, they wind up controlling us. and then we lose our sense of self. Okay?
Yes.
You have to trust the sacredness of your soul as coming from the mystery of all mysteries. I don't care if you believe in God or not, you better believe in mystery unless you think you know it all. If you know it all, then there's no mystery. But I haven't found the person who knows it all yet. So, you have to trust that your soul is something unique and special.
Yes.
And you have to find that light that connects you to all existence and all reality. Some people call that God. I'm not selling. You know what I mean? But you have to do that. And that is the foundation, by the way, of from a political philosophy point of view, that is also simply the foundation of any democracy, where you have rights that are endowed by God, and that no government, no religion, no relationships, no economy is allowed to interfere with those rights. They are considered sacred. This has been the situation since natural law was formed in the 16th century by the enlightened philosophers in Europe. So understanding your soul is not just spiritual, it's also very solid, it's material, it's political, and it's essential, or we'll lose our freedom and our light.
And do you find that within the world of education now, second level and third level, even in the United States at second level, is this being taught? Like we have religious education in schools in this part of the world. In certain parts of Europe, they don't. But, even in your RE class, your religious education class, this is not discussed.
Well, it's discussed in the most old-fashioned way. Okay? It's there. It's there in the scripture. It's there in the teaching. But you're dealing with people who are stuck in the old, kind of pre-Vatican II world. Okay? Ireland can be Catholic or can be Protestant, but it was the same theology. That you're dealing with the idea that the individual doesn't have a direct connection to God. That it only happens through the church or through individuals, whether they're priests or the ministers, and the individual has no direct connection. Democracy was the declaration that the individual had a direct connection. You see? So what happens is when they're teaching the spirituality, they're teaching the spirituality through old-time religion. And what we need to do is revive and evolve old-time religion to include the light of the soul, the light of each individual spirit, which is democratic. And that is long going. The churches everywhere, the institutions are convulsing. They don't know how to do it. And in the US, for example, there is a wave in secondary education where they don't know what to do with the students because the students aren't left-brained anymore. They used to be programmed like little robots to think, science, math, get a good job, engineering, this, all the things society does. But now all the kids are right-brained. They are spontaneous, they're creative, they're natural, and the school educational system is 50 years behind. I mean, Bill Gates hated college, quit. Do you know what I'm talking about? Mark Zuckerberg hated college. He quit. And these were immensely creative people, and these are the archetypes of our generation.
Yes, you're absolutely right. And with all the change, though, that has happened, what I find is that the politics in the schools here, because I was 34 years a teacher as well, what I found is that the politics has not caught up because they are not necessarily putting staff into the school who are experienced enough to be able, because a teacher, whatever area of subject matter it is that they're teaching, they go from novice to being more mature. And very often the more mature you are and the more life experience you have and you change your teaching style to incorporate the realities of life, then they don't want to pay you. Because first of all, you're going to be too expensive. And secondly, this is not really, you're not manipulated. You're not malleable. They can't manipulate you the way they want to.
That's exactly right. And the schools are used as a tool oftentimes for governments. In the United States, when the public schools were created, those are the ones that are you don't call them the same thing there, but these are the normal schools that everyone goes to. They're not what we call.
Yeah, we call them public schools here too.
Yeah. So they became very, very big and very popular when they were trying to get parents to start working in factories. So they pulled the kids out of the school and they gave them something to do. And now everything is changing because we're not a factory-based economy much anymore. We're service.
Yes, where huge swathes of the United States were.
Right. So there has to be a way. You have to open the souls of children, and you have to open the souls of people. Okay. And that's the key to education, from the Greek educare,
Yes.
to draw out what is already in the person.
Yes.
Not shove stuff in and repeat it back, but to open the soul, see what the gifts are that the person brings, and then direct them where they need for their fulfillment. This is an evolved education, and I must tell you, it's very rare.
It is very rare, and sometimes you'd wonder how it is that children survive their childhoods, educationally speaking, because they're given these wonderful stories and rhymes and lovely films and stories such as The Wizard of Oz, which are actually, as we have been studying and as you have written about, they're actually focused on that creative side, growing your talents, allowing your talents to heal you, getting to know who you are, the different facets of yourself, spiritually and otherwise. And then we put them into an educational system which does not develop any of that.
No, I call it, it's a funny pun, but I call it adulterated.
Yes, I saw that in the book. Very good.
Because you're taking the beautiful munchkin, eternal child-like ability, of the soul to be, eternally young and vibrant and colorful and playful and silly and lullaby leagues, and you're taking that and you're adulterating it. You're putting this big
Yes, in fact, you have changed my view of the Munchkins, because I never liked them. Never liked the way they were presented, but in fact, just reading what you had to say,
they're a little creepy.
And they are a little creepy, but that's so unfortunate, because as you say in your book, get in touch with your inner Munchkin, your inner child. Don't lose that.
These days, we would probably have all kinds of political correct issues about displaying a number of small people dressed up in little costumes like that. I don't know if we could ever do it again.
Well, I know what you mean. But even just from the point of view of reminding us to get in touch with our inner child, it works. I mean, at the time, of course, at the time that the film was made, this wouldn't have been politically incorrect. So, we can jump the hurdle there.
And this is what Dorothy faces in the book. She tears away from Auntie Em. She tears away from Uncle Henry and her friends. She's desperately trying to preserve her spirit, her Toto, because Elvira is taking that animal, that her defiant spirit, and trying to put it in the back of a bicycle seat basket and cart it away to be destroyed, And Dorothy has to connect to her pure, unadulterated child, the ones that that isn't afraid to leave Auntie Em, that isn't afraid to get on the road and explore, like Professor Marvel was going. And we all have to do that.
Yes, as you say, set your inner Toto free. You're saying that.
Set your inner Toto free. And Toto, is it like a totem animal in Native American tribes, or it's like the Latin toto, which means all? Your spirit is all you need.
Absolutely. Okay? But how many of us are actually truly equipping our children and our young people for that road? That's what worries me a little bit. I feel that I was far more equipped up to the time I left school I left school in 1981. I was about 18, 19 then. I was far more equipped than a lot of the young people today. They're much, much, much more restricted.
Much more restricted, and they're much more funneled into the machine. They are hardwired into the machine. Okay, it's very Matrix.
Yes.
If you ever saw that movie, it's very scary. It's the Matrix, and everything's
Yes.
funneled through the communications machine.
Yes.
The electronic body of Christ, which is really what the internet is. It's like the electronic body of Christ.
Yeah.
It's not the true spirit body of Christ, but it's the electronic, a
Yeah.
facade, an electronic body of
And
Christ.
to some extent, I mean, I know you talk about the Matrix there, but in some ways that is there also in Oz, in the story of Oz.
Well, of
You know,
course it is. And that's the thing. Dorothy has to wake up to realize that this dream that she's having, okay, is a projection of her own fears.
yes.
And that these are her own emotional issues that were percolating underneath that she has to heal in order to go home more complete. And she has
Yes.
to deny their reality. She has to deny that the witch is going to imprison her in the castle. She has to deny that the witch has any hold over her soul. She has to take back the broom.
Yes. Taking back the broom.
Broom,
Yes.
the power, the witch's male aspect, like a a
Yes.
member,
Yeah.
like a penis.
Getting back as well in the driver's seat. Yes.
The driver's seat, take back her male power so
Yes.
that she is more powerful than even the wizard and can return home with just clicking her heels.
And that is a huge break. This is what we're not educating our young people to do.
No.
To do it without arrogance
Right.
is the difficult
And
bit
it's
too.
partly because, Mary, it's partly because, I'm a parent. I've been a parent. I have 3 children. By the time they grow up, you're exhausted. You just want them, you just want them out of the house and earn a little money and get off my tab. I mean, I'm sorry to say that. It sounds very unloving, but it's a human experience.
Yes,
Sometimes you can just, enough already. You know what I mean?
I know what you mean. I know what you mean.
I gave you birth, but that doesn't mean you have to take my life. So what happens is parents, they keep pushing their kids to get them out, especially for economic reasons. And they lack wisdom. It's the
Yes.
wisdom that's needed.
You talk also in the book about the fear of death, that ultimately a lot of what we're afraid of is when you work through it, it's that fear of death,
It's
when you get to talking about the lion,
when you,
and his lack of courage.
yes, because the fundamental fears, and every single major religion in the world has to deal with it, is that we're born to die. We're born to question whether our death has annihilated our life purpose, whether our life purpose exists beyond it. And every fear that we have is that we're going to be terminated, stopped, cold, meaningless. And we all have a fear of death. And
Yes.
if you don't do well on a job, oh my God, I'm going to be fired. Well, why are you afraid of being fired? What's the big deal of being fired? No, because the money's going to keep me alive. There's a big fear
Yes.
you're going to
Yes.
starve. You're not going to have a home. Death is the thing that gives us the power. And the thing that Dorothy had to do is by facing the Wicked Witch of the
Yes.
East, okay, Wicked Witch of the West, she had to face her deepest fear of dying, that her death would prevent her from going home, prevent her from finding her way back to herself. And only by facing our fears of death, psychic,
Yes.
do we put the fear that's part of being human, an animal, aside, so we can advance spiritually and from the Kansas state of mind to the Oz state of mind.
And guilt is another thing that you focus on as well.
Yeah,
Place of guilt.
Guilt is a wonderful thing. It doesn't feel wonderful. But once you know what guilt is, it's a good friend. Guilt is always 100% of the time a reminder of essential, important responsibilities and boundaries that were not paid attention to. And
Yes.
the spiritual lesson comes through in a very painful way, because the lesson comes through mistakes that are contaminated. The contamination, the self-hatred, the grudges, all these things are buried in the learning about the boundaries and the learning about sacred responsibilities. And it's that contamination of self-hatred and condemnation that turn simple knowledge about the ways of the world into toxic guilt. So anyone out there who's listening, if you have guilt, look for what it's really teaching you and forget the toxic pain.
Yes, and learn to let go, as you were saying, learning to let go of the guilt is difficult.
It's impossible, but it's easy once you accept the fact that the guilt is there as your teacher. And don't pay attention to the fact that it doesn't feel good. Get the lesson, learn what the guilt is teaching you, and also learn to stop the toxic self-hatred and condemnation that causes the guilt. And guilt always takes place where you're basically killing yourself. It's a form of emotional suicide. And
it is.
Yeah. And so you just remove the suicide and learn the lessons, and then you can let go of the guilt. You know? Yeah. We all
like we could talk about this for so long. It's an extraordinary book, and it clarifies so much. And I was a little bit surprised when I first started reading it, because I thought, this is a story that's been with us for so long, but is there any more that can be said about it? And there you go. You just went off in this whole extraordinary, wonderful read. And I really would recommend it to anyone, particularly at Christmas. This is a wonderful read. And can I just clarify with you the lovely, I love the Brains and Guts Entertainment. It's a great way. It's a great publishing name. Your second book, I mean, this one really focuses on the individual. It's a much more personal connection that you're trying to make with your reader.
Yes.
And it is very global. The second book that you published, now this one we've been talking about was published on 23rd of December 2019. So just pre-pandemic. It couldn't have been better really timed, could it? But when we go to your next book, it was a little earlier, wasn't it? So
the book has been revised to include lessons on the
Six Fix.
Yeah. And the book was basically written for America, because America is a mess right now. It's a mess.
Yeah, I mean, it is very much using language that would be directed towards your domestic market.
Yes.
But it was still very interesting for me too. And if you could, I mean, that there would be expressions, for example, that you would use in it that I suppose would be ones we are aware of over here, but that we can't really gel with, a country under God, being a better country under God. That kind of expression would be very much in the vernacular of the American. It wouldn't be in our vernacular, but we are aware of it. So the emotional connections that you would have with a lot of these phrases, and how that also then ties into the state of the country as it is now, would be very American, but it is of great interest to us because we have connections with America and all the Irish in America, for example. And, I mean, what European doesn't have connections with America? But when it comes to certain aspects of the American individual's vision of who they are and what their country should be, that's something we sometimes have to box up and just put aside, because we can't really comprehend it. In the same way that we would struggle with phrases like the American president being the leader of the free world. That's something that is accepted and understood without even thinking about it in the United States. But we would struggle with it over here because we wouldn't see it that way,
Yes,
so,
of course.
There's a lot that we need educating on. And I found that this was almost an automatic progression of the previous book, in that now you're taking a lot of the same principles, but you're going macro with it, where the other one was micro.
Yes.
and you're going into this political sphere with it now. So I'm presuming you would have written this during the time that President Obama was about to leave office, or had Trump already come in?
I began writing it even earlier than that. Let me tell you what the impetus behind it was. The Western civilization has a history. Okay, it was originally Roman Christianity, essentially, which then became Protestant Christianity, which then became enlightened natural law, you know, Republican Democratic society, but it's been a continuation. Okay, I firmly believe that the problems we are having in the world are because our political systems are not spiritually whole. All right, and this is especially true in the United States. And so what I was struggling with is not really what the problem is, because I know what the problem was, but how to teach it. Okay, what was
Okay.
wrong with the West? What was wrong with Western civilization? What needed to be corrected for the new generation? And how can you make it very, very, very simple so that anyone can understand it and learn the laws of life, how life works for good? In other words, the premise of the book is basic spirituality. Everything's cause and effect. Every action has a reaction. What you do comes back to you. So what is the correct way to act so you're in alignment to how the world is designed so you get good results? Okay, that's
Okay.
what the book is about. It's such an unusual topic to try to teach politics to be spiritual.
Yes, because over here, our perception would be that church, religion, spirituality is constantly being evoked in American politics, in speeches.
Yes, because everyone does that when they don't know what they're doing. You know, if they need something to bolster their power and they feel very weak, they drudge up a Bible and they weaponize it. The Bible's not
Yes,
supposed to be weaponized.
yes,
Okay?
yes, they do.
It's supposed to be a tool for inspiration, to give you some principles to reconnect you to the design of reality, which is spiritual. This is a very spiritual world, and it has ways it operates, and you have to, learn the ways of the Force, Luke.
Yes,
You have to
yes,
learn how it operates. So, but they drudge up religion, they drudge up a God, they drudge up an authoritarian figure because they're trying to bolster their own authority. And their own authority has no foundation to it. It has no reality to it. So government, secular government, uses religious government to bolster themselves because they're weak.
yes.
They're
Yeah,
weak.
yeah.
Religious
Understand.
government, religious governments are oftentimes strident and cruel and overly judgmental because they're so afraid that if they actually have discussions about normal human things, that they might lose their identity and they might lose their power. And everyone's fighting over power. So, the Six Fix was designed as a way of teaching what are the core spiritual principles, whether they're applied in the US or whether they're applied in Ireland or anywhere. It's the same stuff because we're
So
all.
just take us through them there. The first one was health, wasn't it?
Well, look, they were basically, the world has a certain way of working. If I jump up, I'm coming down. Okay?
Yes.
That's it. And that means if I stand on the edge of a cliff and a wind is behind me, I'm going to fall. Okay?
Yeah.
Now, if I were to write a Bible, I would write, "Thou shalt not stand with thy back to the wind, for verily I will smite you and you will fall." And I get a
Yes.
Bible.
Yes.
That's why the Bible has all sorts of very interesting things in there, because I got to tell you something from a Jewish point of view. If you eat infected meat, you're going to get sick, and it will be God punishing you, meaning there won't be good in it. You know what I mean? So this is a way of saying, align yourself to the way life is working. So there are two basic things. You have value priorities, because
Yes.
the dice of the die of life are weighted in a certain direction. And they're weighted in the direction of life-centeredness. What is enhancing to life? That's how it works. All values. So
Yes.
after you have life, what's the single most important? And you have enough air to breathe, enough food and water and a little clothing. What's the most important thing in life? It's health. Because if you don't have your health, you're not going to be a good worker. Companies are going to be hurt. We know that from the pandemics. Health is the single most important priority in human life once you have life. Okay? Health, number one, value. Well, do our companies and our governments operate as if human health is the most important thing? No. Everyone debates about healthcare. Should it be public? Should it be private? That's nonsense. That's an economic issue. But
Yes.
put the priority of the best healthcare for every single person, the best food, correct teaching people how to eat. Number one priority for a happy life where you're aligned to life, how life works. Then there's peace. If you don't have health, you're not going to have peace. So peace is second. You got to have freedom, because if you don't have freedom, there's no inquiry, there's no intelligent creativity, and there's stagnation. You have to have wisdom. Wisdom requires care. You care about people.
And wisdom is very difficult to teach. It's something that grows.
It grows. Now, this is a very American book, so I put wisdom after freedom. But if you have wisdom, freedom would come after wisdom.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
But there's such a shortage of wisdom that you'll never rebuild the wisdom without the freedom to experiment and find it. So wisdom has to have care. It is truth-centered, and it has to have a certain balance. It has to have balance. Then we have to have the expression of our full potential. Every single human being has a unique potential that has to be educated, pulled out of them, and expressed.
Yes.
Right? It's every single human being. If they waste their full potential, they are not contributing to this world. They're not contributing to nature. They're not contributing to society. And last, which most people put first, is prosperity.
Yes.
Okay?
Yes.
Of all kinds, sharing, bartering, and money, which is a wonderful tool of spiritual transformation.
Some people might be surprised to see it on the list, but it has to be on the list because you have to prosper. You have to have that achievement of prospering in order to continue the process, because that's the full circle.
Yes, and money is just a form of bartering, and bartering is sharing human energy. It's inseparable from a healthy spiritual relationship, okay? And money is essential, but health comes first.
Yes, but it's still, Michael, isn't it still a taboo subject?
Yes, because
discussing prosperity, money, financial prosperity, and spirituality.
Many religions took the teachings that said, okay, spirituality is more important. Your connection to God is more important than the earth. Put spirit over body. Put, the kingdom of God over money. And that created a duality, which is a lie. The fact
agree. Yeah.
Everything can be devoted to good, okay? And it needs to be devoted to good, and everything is a tool for goodness. So, the fact is that they malign money, and when you repress anything, then you express it too much. So I believe it's the repression around money that causes people to express it too much in the form of greed. Okay? It's kind of like an adolescent being sexual. If you repress too much, they're going to express too much. If you tell them don't, they're going to do. Okay? And the issue again is wisdom or balance. So those are the value priorities. These are the values of the way life is designed. This is how the machinery of life works. Every single thing we do, whether it's government or religion or family life or sex or anything, has to cohere with these values because these are built into the design of life. How they
Yes.
got here, I'm not leaving God out. The book hardly mentions the word God for a reason, because the G word gets very, very confusing.
Yeah. Yeah. It means
But
something different to
these are
everyone. Yes.
9 elements. You jump up, you're coming down. You avoid health, you're going to wind up in trouble. Health is number one, you
Yes.
know? So, but all of these values have to work in relationship priorities, right? The most important relationship priority is your relationship with yourself. If you do not take care of yourself, you will be weak and feeble. You will not be able to contribute to others. Unfortunately, a lot of religions tell you to take care of everyone else first at your expense. And all you do
Yes.
is drain yourself, because it's an improper form of martyrdom. All right. There's a lot of sick martyrdom in religion. And you're not supposed to martyr yourself in the form of sacrificing yourself for good, except when there's imminent life and death error, threats, like a bus going to hit a child. You
Absolutely.
throw yourself. Other than that, you're not supposed to self-sacrifice for helping other people. You're supposed to put the oxygen mask on yourself first over your own children.
Yes.
So you have to take care of yourself. You have to take care of another. Every other person is a self. You have to take care of all others, even companies and governments and religions, even your worst enemy. You got to take care of them too. They're human. Okay.
Yes.
And then you have to take care of all life and creation, every animal on this planet. Without an ant or a worm to aerate the soil, we would starve. Sure, we're higher animals. Sure, we're more gifted and more spiritual and more advanced and can go to the moon. But we can't survive without an earthworm and an ant to aerate the soil for our plants.
Yes.
Let's have some humility.
Yes. Yes. Absolutely. And what I love about this book is that you make these arguments, which of course are quite deep, but as simple as they are, to actually go into debate over them can be quite deep. But you make it accessible to the average Joe on the street who can read this very, very easily. That's something I just wanted to come to now, if I could, for a moment, because you're you are very knowledgeable, and your style encompasses politics, science, religion, on all across the spectrum of religions. You're very, very well taught and well schooled on all the different types of religions. Do you make it a personal choice to detach from even the vocal speech styles of so many, maybe other rabbis, ministers, what have you, that may have that negative influence on people? You seem to just speak as yourself. You don't seem to follow any particular model. Is it
Thank you.
important for you to just be yourself?
Well, I don't have a choice.
In your ministry.
I don't have a choice. And let me tell you, first of all, my background is very odd. I'm not very religious at all, I must tell you, even though I'm a rabbi. I was an advertising creative director.
Yes, I saw that.
And I was on Madison.
The best a man can get. We're still playing it here.
It's all over the world.
You are responsible for that slogan.
I am responsible for writing that. And so that was a great gift, because I went from academics into that, and I learned how to communicate in simple soundbite language.
Yes.
Okay. But I also learned other things, Miriam. I learned when a campaign's not working.
Yes.
And even though I was ordained, and by the way, I didn't seek to become a rabbi. I'm not religious. It's one day I met a renowned international scholar, and it was a miracle, actually. It was a total miracle that I met him. I mean, really spooky, okay? Spooky. And he just simply announced that I was the student he had been praying for, and I stepped in to his prayer. I just like walked. I just walked into his prayer one day,
It can
and that
happen.
and that led to my ordination. But after my ordination, I really felt brokenhearted because I had a very, very good education, but it didn't hold together. I couldn't teach it to children. I couldn't teach it to people in a way that wouldn't make the stupid things, stupid mistakes that the rabbis who raised me when I was little did. And I shot them the bird and said, get out of here. I'm through with religion. And I walked away from religion when I was 13. The question is, since God, for lack of a better term, sent me back to religion, to I returned home, I wouldn't want to make the same mistakes that they'd made on me. So
Yes.
I spent, oh, I'd say a goodly amount of 10 to 15 years basically in a cave. Okay.
Right.
I broke down religious philosophy from Judaism, Catholicism, Hinduism, mathematics, philosophy. I broke the pieces down and reassembled them and made them truth-based, and then tried to figure out spiritually how to teach people. And in the spiritual process, I had to figure out what were real boundaries, what were imagined boundaries. Anyway, it all resulted in, finally, it came together with the Six Fix and how do I help America? Because we don't have a church that is the official church of the state. We have so much freedom, we're killing ourselves. Okay.
Okay.
And how do you keep lines of decency without hammering people with religious guilt and government? You have
So
to.
was that it? Was that the trigger for writing the book?
Yes, because you cannot have a democratic culture and give people freedom unless they know how to self-guide their life.
Okay.
Because if they can't do that, then they're going to be strong-armed by government, they're going to be strong-armed by religion, and we will lose the great invention of democracy that we've had for the past 300 years. We'll lose it. And in fact, we run the risk of losing it now all over the world because there is a very, very serious reaction to try to control people and control resources, right? So, the book was a brokenhearted rabbi trying to take his knowledge and frame it like an ad man so I could communicate it to people. And that's what you're noticing.
Yes, and it works. It works.
I just had to reinvent the language. I had to reinvent it in simple terms so I could communicate it.
Yes, yes. And that is where an awful lot of pastors, priests, that's where they're losing their congregation. I mean, if you go into an Irish church today, I can't speak for the synagogues here, though I do know an awful lot of Jewish friends who would, say that they're flourishing a little more than the Catholic Church is. But today you will struggle to find an Irish person in a Catholic church in Ireland. It's
Yes.
mainly Poles, Lithuanians.
Yes.
That's who you'll find as the regular churchgoer now.
And
that is because of the corruption that we experienced with things like the Tuam baby scandal and, hundreds and hundreds of babies being killed. And the way that at the beginning of the millennium, the way the Irish people did turn their back on organized religion. But here there's been a huge move back to spirituality, Celtic spirituality. So I'm sure that at some point we're going to come full circle again. But right now, the people who are filling the churches are not so much your pre-millennial Irish person, and it would have been the more monocultural society of Ireland then. But instead, it's the post-millennium Irish person which is made up of other nationalities. And we have to criticize ourselves here in Ireland too. We were a very monocultural country up until the millennium. Absolutely, we were. Most foreign nationals wanted to go to the United Kingdom. They didn't really want to settle here. But although we exported so many people, we were still very monocultural. So right now you have, we're in transition. We're in huge transition. But when it comes to the United States, there is still that huge relationship there. We are still observing and trying to understand what's going on, because we know we're in flux. We are in flux with all the changes, spiritual and otherwise, going on in this country, and our population suddenly going up, which it didn't do for years. But we are also looking at the United States that we are so connected to. We're far more connected to the United States than we are the UK, which is only, 40 minutes across the water. The United States is, is our right arm.
Sure.
So we definitely need to be able to understand each other at the spiritual level, because Ireland is an immensely spiritual country. It's in our blood and bones. We seek the spiritual first before anything else. And that's part of the backlash that has just happened here.
And the backlash is not necessary. The rise of Celtic philosophy in Ireland and around the world, it's not a mistake. It's that the previous wave of Western civilization, which has its origin in Romanism, disrespected nature, it disrespected women, it disrespected what they called pagan, and made the word pagan to be identical to evil, which
was so wrong.
Which was excessive. And I use excessive because to a naturalist culture, is a precious part of spirituality. There was no respect in the Roman imperial culture for nature. You could own anything you wanted. It was all about male dominance. It was a vir cult, V-I-R. It was a vir cult. It was a male. It was a male cult.
Yes.
And what happened was, after World War II, and this will bring you full circle, when Hitler tried to resurrect nature as a god instead of the old god of morality and judgmentalism, after that, there was a gigantic change in the entire world. So you have India got released with gurus, Buddhism, Hindu philosophy, American transcendentalism, hippie,
Yes.
Women's liberation, gay liberation, indigenous rights liberation, ecology movements, spiritual movements, Celtic movements, all of which were the same thing, attempting to put our connection back to the body of nature on the planet, which had been disregarded and maligned by the first wave of Western civilization because of its Roman roots.
Yes.
I'm a Jew. My people said no to the Roman Empire, right? We believed if you even had a slave or a servant, they had to rest and be treated. And if you didn't treat them well, they had to be set free.
And the Irish Celts did the same.
Of course, because they were connected to nature.
Mm.
So our part of the Bible, the first part, was ignored, except for the ethics and anything that could prove Jesus's position and the power base of Roman Christendom. Our people were maligned, and we were considered people of the body, covenant of the body. Well, we were basically indigenous people. We had sacred lands.
Yes. Yes.
I understand the Celt as my sister, as my brother.
Yes.
The way, because we never got rid, we were always universal, but we were
always.
We were also indigenous.
Yes.
And we were odd because we were both universal and indigenous.
Yes.
Greece wasn't, Roman wasn't. None of these things were indigenous and universal. And that's why the Jew is such an odd, we're so strange, but that's what our culture was, because we took on the whole world, and yet simple attachment to the sacred spots of nature.
Yes, absolutely.
So I believe, and here I'm really preaching my message. So thanks for the opportunity. I believe the missing piece of the puzzle to Christianity is the indigenous aspect of the Jew that they rode over and tried to conquer. And then the New Testament and the Old Testament will be on the right footing together, and we can revive knowledge of creation, meaning life on earth, and connect it to knowledge of human spirit and potential and vision, which frankly, Romanism and Greek philosophy was astonishing at. And we will come full circle, Miriam, but we have to teach people, don't despair. These are motions of human mind.
Yes, that's a very important message in both books.
Yes, these are motions of human mind. These are thought processes that are historical and political. And if we make ourselves aware of how they're organized, how these things took place, why we're having issues with abortion, why we're having issues with gays, what do these mean? And what are we wrestling with in terms of the 2,000 years of Western civilization? We won't feel like we're outside of the culture looking in.
Well, now you've just mentioned two books that you've got to write next: Jews Getting Back to Nature and this.
Well,
I'll be watching.
I do believe that there's a missing piece of the puzzle in Christian Western civilization, and yes, that's the Jew. And by the way, sometimes the Jew gets mad. Well, not sometimes, a lot of times the Jew gets kind of lost in the religion and forgets their indigenous roots.
Yes, it's a very interesting point. I'd love to see you write on it, because I haven't heard of anyone writing on this.
No, because I think it's best, I'll tell you the truth, I think it's best to lecture on it.
Okay.
And do small little communications. It's very dense. Very few people deal with the philosophy of Hitler. They just deal with him as being bad. Of course, he was bad, but why he created a cultural movement and a thought process that linked Aryanism in Hindu philosophy, yes, with German Teutonic culture.
Yes.
Okay.
What led to that is fascinating.
He took all the symbols out of India and he reversed the polarity, because he was well versed in Madame Blavatsky in the 19th century, and he knew there was a problem by ignoring nature, but he resurrected nature as Nietzsche's blonde beast. Okay. And he coupled it together with a bad Darwinism that said the stronger you are, the more you'll survive. And he created a fascist nightmare out of bad Hindu philosophy, okay, and bad Darwinism. And it was a nightmare. But nonetheless, it happened because the world had gotten very anti-natural to an extreme. And only at that moment in time, hope I'm not talking too much, but at that moment in time when the people of the flesh, the covenant of the flesh, the Jew, that had been identified with the devil and identified with materiality, resisting spirit, and Hiroshima, where we actually gained ascendancy over matter, mother, so that even Robert Oppenheimer declared us to be gods, quoting the Gita. These two parallel events were when the human mind reached a zenith of conquering matter and nature, okay, and understanding its subatomic structure, and we released the creative forces from inside matter. Then everything changed. India opened up, the Buddhists opened up, Wicca, Celts, women, gays, everything that had been labeled pagan. And we are in trouble in this world because we're wrestling. We let the worms out of the can, but we can't put them back in the same can. We've got to evolve the can. Okay? We have to understand the gift of clean, not degenerate. Clean, true, pagan has virtue to it, and it is good. It is part of the puzzle of redemption and religion. Not degenerate paganism that was called degenerate cultures, abomination.
Yes, that's how it was viewed. Yes.
Yes. But in the Bible, you had degenerate cultures. You actually had degenerate cultures that were burning their own children, okay, that
Yes.
were engaging in excessive animal sex, and they were degenerate, meaning they weren't reproducing. Human populations were waning. But
Yes.
this was all labeled pagan, meaning if it's not Christian or if it's not Jewish, it's pagan. And it became religious, and that was nonsense. Okay? It was generate versus degenerate. Does it produce life or does it destroy life? Okay? And you can have pagan Judaism. You can have a degenerate Judaism, a degenerate Catholicism, a degenerate democracy, okay, if they're not aligned to how God created this world or how this world evolved on its own. Okay? The pagan in the negative sense can be anyone, including a God-fearer.
Yes. Yes. And you can slip into this. This is why I think it actually would be very interesting, because you've got the language and the skill set to take this very dense and very deep subject.
It is, and
yeah, you could go there. You could go there, Michael.
Very hard to describe it in a way that can communicate it because it's so thoroughly complex.
Yeah.
But it is.
But fascism is on the rise. You know, we have a problem today, and because the world is moving, well, it's moving due to social media and computers and the technology, of course, at such a pace now. If someone isn't actually putting these thoughts down, either in lectures, as you say, and do a compilation of lectures that would be available and archived, someone's got to note down these thoughts.
We have to. Let me tell you something. I know this is scary to people. My teachers were brutal, by the way. I had a good education. They were tough on me. When you think about it, there is an implicit fascism that is part of democracy. The minute I make an individual the decision maker for what is right and wrong, and it's not government,
yes.
It's not religion.
Yes.
That in itself is the beginning. If it becomes excessive, that's the beginning of fascism. So yes. Democracy, when it doesn't have a sense of spiritual connection to people, can produce fascism where everyone thinks they're the king of their own world. And
yes, because it's different. You can't be neutral on every subject.
Exactly. So with these absolutism, democracy is right, this is right and this is right. That's not true. The world is organized a certain way, and all of our philosophies and all our beliefs circulate in an ecology of mind and an economy of thought. And if they are not in alignment to the way this world is designed, we will sow and reap, to use Jesus's expression, we will sow and reap a disaster.
Yes.
Good will not come to us. And God is just a contraction of the word good. So if you want to use religious language, use religious language. You could say God punished you, or you could say good withdrew from you. All right? I did not have good. It doesn't make a difference whether you believe in God or use atheist language or not. The laws of reality are the laws of reality.
The laws of reality. Yes, exactly. Exactly. Can I just take you back to the book for a second, though, in the target audience side of, like, okay, you've completed the book, you now have to place it where people who need this message can reach it.
Yes.
So where was your plan then to go with the 6 fix?
Well, the plan is continuing. I've been very, the 6 fix, I'm getting very, very interesting response from, and I'm very edified. Extreme right-wing Republican people love it. Extreme left-wing Democratic people love it. Meaning they both see it as, it's just mind-boggling to me.
Yeah.
They see themselves reflected in it. And that's not pandering. It's just that everyone's entitled to opinion, but truth is truth.
Yes.
So I'm not left-wing, right-wing. I'm not Democratic. I'm not Republican. I'm not political. I vote for the greatest truth with the least harm.
Yes.
Because I don't trust the human opinion, including my own, 100%. I'm just a human being. That's called humility. So we're taking that out, and it was on, Newsmax, which is a very, very super right-wing TV station. And there are people in the Democratic Party that are very interested in it. And I'm hoping that the perspective can help bring us thinking together. That's what I'm hoping.
Well, that would be some achievement in these times.
All I can do is my share.
Absolutely. Yeah. And as usual, Ireland shall be on the outskirts, watching, looking in.
Well, possibly.
He always does.
Possibly, but I
on
must.
The edge of Europe.
Some of the
Listen, Michael, thank you so much for writing those books. They are absolutely wonderful. I really recommend them, everybody, if you're looking for a really good book, literary presence with a spiritual theme, but that are also relevant to the problems of today and to you as an individual and how you can get through even this pandemic. It's all in those books. It is really, and as you can see from just watching and listening to Michael, he has the skill set, he has the language, he has the clarity of thought. He's putting things that are very difficult to communicate into this book for you to mull over and read and really enjoy. So please have a look. And just thank you so much, Michael, for giving your time today and chatting to me. I'm delighted to have met you. You're a fascinating person.
If there is any opportunity at all to get the world, have some knowledge about this stuff, just invite me. I'm there. Okay, we need to talk about it.
You heard it, folks. You heard it. He's there.
Right,
and a great interview and with really, really important things to say, a very important message on spirituality. Look, a lot of us are done with religion in many respects, which hurts all of us to say. But for so many of us, spirituality has become the new goal, the most important goal. And it doesn't mean you throw the baby out with the bathwater, because I know, listen, I got up every day when I was in secondary school. So in other words, from aged 13 to 18, and I sang at 7:30 Mass every single morning, and then went to school for 9 o'clock, The church gave us so many opportunities. With all the bad things in all of our churches, there are wonderful things as well. And we can't forget that.
And they're just people like us.
They're just people. Exactly. You're so right. Michael, thank you so much for being on Writer's Block.
Thank you. God bless.
Thank you.